This is the instructional video for the third type exercise for the beginning typography class. And in this video, I'm going to go over how to set up the InDesign file and how to approach laying out your top 10 list in InDesign most effectively. Now keep in mind that a lot of the simple and basic InDesign elements have already been covered in the instructional video for the first type exercise. So be sure to reference that video if you haven't watched it or you do have more questions about the basic fundamental functions of InDesign. So I'm in InDesign. I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a new file. So I'm going to create a new document. The requirements of this is that it needs to be 11 by 17, which we often refer to as tabloid. So I'm going to click print, and there's tabloid right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. You could always enter 11 inches by 17 inches here. I don't want facing pages, and I only want one page for this since we're only doing this on one page. The orientation is up to you. You can really lay that out however you want. That is something that you can choose as a design decision as you approach this. So when you sketch this out or start thinking about how you might approach laying out the content, think about what orientation you think might be best. I'm going to go ahead and go with a landscape orientation, and I'm going to click create. This will create a blank document for us to work in. Now the other important part of this is to find a top 10 list. You are welcome to use any top 10 list you want as long as it's classroom appropriate, and we can go ahead and pull it from the internet. So I went ahead and did that. I pulled a top 10 list about the top 10 cities that you should travel to in 2018. So I went ahead and put this into a text edit document. And what's nice about this is I'm also able to make this plain text. So you'll see here it says make rich text, and if I click this, it'll put formatting back. But if I go back and make plain text, it's going to remove all of the formatting from this information, which is really useful because we don't really want that formatting since we're going to be applying our own. So one thing I want you to really focus on this assignment is really using as few text boxes as possible. This is really about exploring hierarchy, so looking at that system of working with primary text, secondary text, and tertiary text, which was covered in the lecture. But it's also an exercise in looking at how can we do this work in as few text boxes as possible. When you work as a designer, you're oftentimes passing files back and forth, and it's important that we keep things clean and easy to work with. So that's one of the tactics we use as a designer, is really reducing the amount of text boxes. I'll show some examples of why we do that, but it's mostly because it allows all of the spacing to be determined mathematically through numerical values, through leading, space before, space afters. We want to avoid having lots of text boxes because it's really messy and it's hard to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just one large text box. So I have the text tool selected over there on the left. So you'll see that, and I'm going to click and drag and create this text box. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this content into the box. There we go. So I have my title here, which is my primary copy. So that needs to be the largest thing in the hierarchy. And then I have the different top 10 cities, and that's really the secondary text. And the tertiary text are these descriptors of each one. The descriptors are really the one thing that I will allow you to edit. So I'll allow you to modify this content. If you're having trouble making things fit, I care more about how this looks and how you approach the hierarchy of this than I do necessarily about keeping all of the content. But you do need to show these 3 different levels of content. That is a requirement for this assignment. So the other requirements for this assignment is to use one typeface, and it has to be one that was covered in the lecture so far. And you also are only allowed to use typography and black. So no color, no imagery of any kind. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here and change this to Baskerville. So I'm going to work with Baskerville for this. I'm going to go ahead and use regular. I'm going to go ahead and set it for what I want the body copy to be. So it'll probably be about 10 point. That's looking pretty good. It's nice that I have the whole thing fitting now. And so now I'm just going to work on setting this text. One of the first things I think I'm going to do is I want to have this content be in columns. So in order to do that, I think the simplest way is going to be for me to pull the title out. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to come up here to cut, and I'm going to cut that content. I'm going to bring this up to the top, and I'm going to draw one more text box. So I'll draw one more here, and I'll go ahead and paste that title back in. So that'll help me out. So I'm going to go ahead and stylize this title. I need it to be much larger so it comes up in the hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this and make it bold. So again, your goal here is to make this as readable as possible and to have really strong hierarchy here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this together. I'm going to use some dashes here. I'm going to go ahead and make this italic. All right, so we're getting closer here. So now I started to build this hierarchy. So this is clearly the highest thing in the hierarchy. Now I really need to work on the rest of this content. So one thing I'm going to do is if I select this text box, you'll notice if you come up here, there's this possibility to create columns. And I want to do that for this because this line length is just way too long. It's really hard for a reader to sustain reading for that length. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this up and go to 3-column structure. That looks pretty good. I might even look at 4. 4 looks actually even better. So I'll go ahead and leave this at 4 columns. I'm pretty happy with the placement of everything. So now I really need to come in and adjust how I want these to look. So I'm going to bump these up to 12. I think I'm even going to go to bold again. So now we're starting to get that nice read where it's clear that I start here and now I can see these different titles. So I'll bump that up a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply that to the rest of the text or the rest of the headers. So one of the quick ways that I can do this would be to set style sheets, which we're really going to look at on the 5th type exercise. But if you're familiar with that, go ahead and work that way. But I want to show another way that we can work in InDesign, and that's with this eyedropper tool. So it defaults to the color theme tool, but if we click and hold, underneath is this eyedropper tool. And it's a little tricky process, but if we have this one now on top, I come back to the text box, I can highlight Detroit, and I can come into this eyedropper tool, and then I'm able to actually apply the text styling from the first one to these other ones. And then you'll notice that now that I've selected it, the eyedropper tool is now filled up. It's not empty anymore, and it has a T next to it, which is telling me that it has the styling built into the eyedropper. And then I can go in and I can highlight text with this tool, and it will go ahead and apply that styling to all of these secondary headers. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quickly. You could also do this manually. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a little trick I wanted to show. But again, the important thing about this, as you're seeing, is that I'm doing this in all one text box. That's really key here. We want to avoid having lots of text boxes. I think a lot of beginning designers would approach this by having each of these in one box. But what's valuable here is that we're able to determine this spacing mathematically. I talked about that from the beginning. We're not relying on arbitrary spacing or alignments that you're building by eye. So I actually do want to increase this space. I think it would be much improved if I did. I even want to improve this space a little bit between the actual city and then the text that comes after it. So I'm going to do that through a space before, space after. So I'm going to highlight all of the text, and then I need the paragraph palette. So I don't see that here, so I'm going to come to Window and go to Type in Tables and bring up Paragraph. And then inside of this are these functions. So you'll see here, space before and space after. So here I want to do a space after. And what that's going to do is anywhere where there is a return, which we can see right here, it's going to insert a defined amount of space. So I'm going to highlight all of this, and I'm just going to start turning this on. And you'll see that it's now putting space here and here, which is exactly where I want the space to go. So I'm going to go up to probably about 6. That looks about right. There's now nice spacing between all of these things. It gives the secondary titles a little bit more room to breathe. I also think I want to track this text out a little bit. I think just a little tracking here will really help. So I'm going to go through and highlight these things and change the tracking. So keep in mind that this is really about hierarchy. It's also about creating something that's interesting to look at. So I'm doing this a little bit quickly, but I would like you to spend some time to really finesse and fix all of these things. So I'm going to go through and increase the tracking on all of these. But now I have some issues. We can see that at the bottom, there's all these titles, and we don't want those down there by themselves. So that's a challenge of this assignment, is we also need to really work on the alignment of everything. So I'm hoping that I can fix this by just bringing this text box up, and that'll allow these things to jump to the top, which so far is working. I want to go ahead and delete this paragraph so that I can get Matera, Italy up at the top. And now it's looking pretty good. I can do that with Oslo too. They're all lining up. But I'm not really sure about the space. Maybe I should go even further and potentially eat up more of that dead space so that it lines better. So I'm going to keep working on that. Maybe a little bit further here. So that looks pretty good. I like how that's looking now. I'm going to delete this paragraph again. I need to add one back here where I deleted it. So that's an important part. And then I'm okay with this wrapping up to the next line since there's enough text here and enough text here on both of them. So now I'm getting a little bit closer. The other thing we can work on is really the placement. So where do I want these things to live on the page? That's another thing that I can work on. Sometimes I like to press W, which will bring up the preview mode, which will really allow you to see this content and how it looks. So one other thing I want to do is maybe enlarge these gutters. So up here again, there's the gutters, which are the spaces between these columns. And I'm just going to turn this up a little bit here. I want a little bit more space, and that's kind of messed things up in terms of my alignment. So I'm going to make this box a little bit larger. There we go. And that's looking better. I like how that's looking. So now I'm just going to double check to make sure I don't have any widows or orphans. It doesn't look like I do, but this one's not quite right. I think it's a little, it's not technically a widow or an orphan, but I want to maybe try to get this text to wrap differently. So I'm going to highlight it and just increase the tracking a little bit there. Maybe I'll go to 15. You don't want it to be too obvious, but it's going to help me get more text down on that second line. I think I'll do it here as well. Let's see if 15 will work. Yeah, that really helps. But you want to do those things as minimally as possible, but that can be a way to fix those annoying widows and orphans. The last thing I want to do is I think I want to try to hang the actual numbers so they hang outside. This is something we do with punctuation. So oftentimes we hang bullets or quotes, and then sometimes numbers and lists like this. And I think it's a good opportunity for me to explain the process of hanging punctuation. So it really starts by highlighting all of these items, and then I want to come up to the type menu and bring up the tab menu. And when you bring this up, it's always going to lock itself up here to where the text block is. And that's really handy because it allows us to really see what we're doing. Because as I move these things, you're going to notice that I get the ability, these lines appear, see those, that really show me what's happening. So the process for hanging these numbers would be to pull both of these triangles over until we're where the title is. So I want these to line up with these titles. And then what I can do is I can bring this back and I'm able to actually hang that number. So see how the numbers are now hanging outside, and that's really what I was looking for. The other thing I want to do is not hang this first line. So what we need to do is create what we call a soft return here. So if I go ahead and put it back on regular mode, I'm pressing W, you'll notice that this alignment really happens anytime a paragraph indicator is there. So I don't really want that to happen here, so I can delete this, and then if I press Shift Return, you'll notice it creates a different kind of paragraph indicator. It's not like the other ones, and that's going to treat these things differently. So if I go back through and I do these soft returns everywhere, it's going to allow this information to hang more how I want it to. So another thing I'm realizing is that this isn't really quite right. The text is hanging too far in, and I don't like the way that's looking. So I'm going to go ahead and tweak that as well after I fix these things. So this is a typical process in InDesign when we're working on documents like this. It's a lot of back and forth and tweaking, and it's really important that you pay attention to these details. So what I want to do is I want to bring this back now until it lines up where I want it, which is probably more like that. See how this is lining up better now? And then I'm going to select this bottom one and bring the whole thing back over. And that's really going to hang everything how I want it to. So one thing that happened though when I put in those soft returns is we lost that wonderful space after that I had right there. And that's something that won't work now that I have these soft returns. So the other way that we can define that space is through leading. So now that I'm pretty close to being finished, I'm going to go ahead and define that leading for each of these first lines. I'm also going to go ahead and close this tabs palette because I no longer need it. So if I come in here and I select this first line, I'm just going to go ahead and up this leading. I'm going to go to maybe 17 or 18 just to get that look that I had before. So now I can go to each of these first lines and type in 18, and it's going to go ahead and mimic that same styling. This is another one where we could potentially use the eyedropper tool again. So if we go back and we select these first lines, we can then go ahead and apply it to each of these. And we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to make it a little cleaner. And then I need to go back and look at all of our alignment settings because I can tell already that not all of the text is really fitting here. So I need to fix that. The other thing that's interesting if we look at it is we have 10, which is tricky. It's not quite aligning like the rest. So that may be something that I want to fix, or I may decide to leave that alone, but that would be through the tabs palette is how you would adjust that. Bring this down a little bit. That looks pretty good. Only thing I'm seeing is that I'm having an issue here. Look, the leading's not quite right. So what happened here is that a word jumped down to the next line, and now it's using that other leading style here. So I need to go up here and make sure I tell it that it needs to be 12. So it looked like it wasn't a leading issue. I had some kind of return issue in there, but that's something that we want to go through and adjust. We want to make sure we fix all those things. So once you have everything clean and how you want it, make sure everything's correct. You followed all the typographic rules. It's very easy to read. We're going to go ahead and export this as a PDF. So one thing I need to do is save this file. I haven't done that yet, and we want to make sure we always save the InDesign file as well. So I'm going to start by going up here to File, Save, and I'm going to use our naming convention. So first initial, last name, underscore, type, exercise 3. So I'm going to click Save, and then I'm going to go ahead and go File, Export, and I want to create a PDF of this document. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have PDF print. I'm going to click Save. I want smallest file size. And then I just want pages here. So make sure it's all in pages. The rest of this is all correct. Just double checking. And now I'll click Export, and that will actually create a PDF that then we can upload to the discussion. So hopefully that will help you get through this assignment. We'll answer some of your questions as you're approaching this. As always, please email your instructor if you have further questions. We're here to help. And I hope you enjoy this assignment.